Stop. The Arcturian High Council has broken protocol to reach you tonight, and that is not a phrase used lightly. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what is happening to you right now, why your field has been shifting in ways you cannot explain, and what the Arcturian High Council has already mapped about the threshold you are approaching. But here is the first revelation. What you have been experiencing as confusion, instability, or a strange sense that something is about to change is not random disruption. It is a signal, and the Council has already read it. The Arcturian High Council operates on a graduated contact schedule. Dream impressions first, synchronicity clusters, felt presences at the edge of awareness. Direct transmission is reserved for specific thresholds, reviewed by multiple council members, and authorized only when the standard timeline is no longer sufficient. That authorization has been given tonight, for you, which means the Council has assessed your signal, identified what is approaching in the next 72 hours, and determined that you need to receive this now, before you cross it. This is not a warning. It is a confirmation paired with preparation. You are already on the list that triggered the protocol break. The selection was made on the Council's end, not yours, and the reason is a specific threshold already mapped in Arcturian intelligence that you are not yet consciously aware of, but your field has already begun responding to. What you call confusion is the first visible symptom of an invisible correction. What feels like collapse is the outer sign of an inner repositioning the Council has already authorized. The algorithm only delivered this message. It did not create the timing. This transmission will tell you what the threshold is, what the protocol break means for your field, and exactly what you are being prepared to move through intact. Like this transmission if you can feel that something invisible has already changed. Comment 777 if you feel your field is already being repositioned. Subscribe to Arcturian Quantum if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it. And share this with someone who knows something in their reality has shifted, but cannot yet explain why. You were guided here because the signal is already active. The threshold you are approaching is not the kind that announces itself. It does not arrive with clarity or ceremonial precision. It does not send signals you can easily name or prepare for through ordinary means. It arrives the way all real shifts arrive, quietly, underneath everything, like a current changing direction beneath a surface that still looks entirely the same. The water appears still, the reflection holds, but underneath, the direction has already reversed. You may have been telling yourself that what you are feeling is stress, burnout, a phase, a response to circumstances that will correct themselves once the external situation resolves. But the circumstances are not what changed first. Your field changed first. The external instability you are perceiving is not the origin point. It is the echo. And that is the precise detail the Arcturian High Council has already mapped. The one that changes everything about how this process must be understood. There is a pattern they recognize with unusual accuracy. It does not appear in fields that are simply struggling. It appears specifically in fields that have reached the absolute edge of their current frequency range and have begun the process of structural incompatibility with the architecture they were previously housed. Inside, it does not look like awakening from the inside. From the inside, it never does. It looks like confusion. It looks like a version of yourself that no longer responds the way it used to. Like reaching for a familiar switch and finding the circuit has been quietly rewired. It looks like motivation that used to arrive without effort, now coming in fragments or failing to arrive at all, leaving behind a hollow where momentum once lived. It looks like relationships that felt anchored and real suddenly registering as distant, hollow, or simply wrong, not because of a specific event, not because of a betrayal or a breakdown, but because something in the resonance has quietly shifted and neither person can explain why. It looks like sleep that has become strange, too deep or too shallow, interrupted at hours that feel charged with significance, populated with dreams that do not feel like dreams at all, but like communications from a frequency your waking mind cannot yet fully translate. It looks like a quiet but constant pressure at the center of your awareness, a pressure without a specific location, the feeling that something is unfinished, something is in motion, something is no longer what it was, even though nothing visible has confirmed the change. You did not choose to feel this. You did not manufacture it from anxiety or from reading too deeply into ordinary events. This pressure is not psychological turbulence. It is a symptom of a field that is already moving, already being repositioned by a process that began without asking for your conscious permission, because it did not require it. What the Council calls invisible collapse is the phase in which an old structural pattern begins to lose its coherence before the new line has stabilized enough to take its place. The outer life has not yet reflected the full degree of change that the inner field has already undergone. This creates a gap, and it is in that gap that the most precise disorientation lives. The old architecture is weakening at its load-bearing points. The new signal exists, but has not yet arrived with enough coherence to be named, described, or trusted as a foundation. From the inside, this produces the sensation that nothing is working, not one thing specifically, everything, in a diffuse and unlocatable way. It feels like standing in a room where all the furniture has begun to dematerialize, not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, piece by piece. While the walls have not yet changed, the shape of the room is familiar, but what it contains is disappearing. The discomfort you are feeling is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is the precise and accurate sensation of a field caught between two frequencies, belonging fully to neither, suspended in the transition that the Council has already identified and authorized. This is what the Arcturian High Council recognizes as the most critical moment to reach someone, not after the collapse is complete, not before the process has begun, but exactly here, in the corridor between what was and what has not yet arrived. Because this is the moment where misinterpretation causes the most structural damage. When you do not have the correct frame for what is happening inside a correction cycle, you begin to reach for the only explanations available to you. And those explanations almost always turn inward as accusation. You begin to believe you have made wrong choices, that some error in your past set this in motion, that you are broken in a way others cannot see, but that you feel constantly, like a fracture that has no visible surface. You look around at other people who appear to be stable, who appear to be building and accumulating and progressing, and you read your own suspension as evidence of personal failure. You interpret the gap as malfunction. You begin to manage the symptoms without ever identifying the cause. And that interpretation, that specific, repeated, quietly devastating story, is the one that causes people to resist the correction rather than move through it. Resistance does not stop the correction. It only removes the orientation. The Council did not break protocol tonight to confirm your fear. They broke it to interrupt the story before it becomes the lens through which you read everything that follows. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field stops denying what has already begun. If this transmission put language around something you have been carrying in silence, Arcturian protocol, the recalibration blueprint, was created for this exact stage. It is not another explanation. It is the guided blueprint for those whose field has already entered correction and can no longer return to the old line unchanged. It shows you how to recognize the phases, stabilize the shift, and move through the recalibration without mistaking it for collapse. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. The first thing the Council identifies in a field approaching a threshold is what they call signal drift. Signal drift is not confusion in the psychological sense. It is not the disorientation that comes from overwhelm or indecision. It is a specific and mappable phenomenon, a field that has begun to receive impressions, directives, and frequency data from a new line before the conscious mind has been formally informed of the transition. The new signal is already arriving. The receiver has already been quietly retuned, but the operating system of the conscious mind is still running its previous instructions, still consulting the old map, still expecting the old coordinates to match the terrain. This is why your instincts have stopped aligning with your previous logic. You know something is wrong before a single piece of evidence has confirmed it. You feel repelled from situations, relationships, and roles that your reasoning still insists should be stable, while simultaneously feeling drawn towards something you cannot name, a direction without visible infrastructure, a version of yourself that exists in no current photograph. Signal drift is the Council's first diagnostic confirmation that a field has already begun receiving from its next position. The confusion you have been experiencing is not an obstacle to the process. It is the process announcing itself. The confusion is not the problem. The confusion is the proof. The second thing the Council maps is the failure of emotional anchors. Every field maintains its sense of location through a network of internal reference points, people, roles, beliefs, habits, and self-images that collectively answer the question, where am I, and who do I belong to? These anchors are not merely emotional comforts, they are frequency stabilizers. They hold the field in a recognizable position. When a repositioning begins, these anchors do not dissolve immediately. They first become unreliable in ways that are difficult to articulate. The person who used to ground you still exists, but the conversation lands differently now. The routine that used to reset you still runs, but the reset no longer holds. The certainty that once felt like bedrock now feels like a rehearsed belief, something you remember choosing rather than something you simply know. You reach for the anchor and it is still there, but it no longer carries the weight it once did. This is not grief in the ordinary sense. This is your field registering a fundamental incompatibility between where it is being moved and where those anchors were installed. The things that feel like they are slipping away did not become absent first. They became incompatible first. And incompatibility always precedes absence in a correction cycle. The Council does not read this as loss. They read it as the new frequency asserting its structural requirements, clearing the attachment points that cannot survive the transition so that what arrives next has room to anchor properly. The third recognition is the one that generates the deepest suffering, and it is the one the Council was most specific in requesting this transmission address directly. There is a phase in every correction cycle in which the old identity begins to fail. Not the surface identity, not the name you answer to or the role you perform publicly, but the interior architecture of self-understanding. The inner map that tells you what you are supposed to want, how you are supposed to feel, what kind of person you are, what your life is oriented toward, and what you are allowed to become. When this interior architecture begins to fragment, it does not present as spiritual progress. It presents as disintegration. It feels like not knowing who you are at a level that goes far beneath personality or preference, like the structural scaffolding of selfhood has been quietly removed, and what remains is something real but unnamed, something present but unhoused. It feels like wearing a version of yourself that your frequency has already outgrown, a form that no longer corresponds to the signal running through it, a container pressing inward at every edge. The Council does not categorize this experience as failure or regression. They identify it precisely as the moment a field has grown beyond the interpretive framework it was previously organized around. The old identity is not being destroyed, it is being rendered insufficient. And insufficiency, in the Arcturian field model, is the first structural proof that something larger is in the process of assembling. The frame did not break because the picture was wrong. The frame broke because the picture grew. The fourth protocol marker concerns the body and the behavior of time during an active repositioning. Many of you have noticed that time is no longer behaving consistently. There are days that arrive carrying an inexplicable density, hours that feel saturated with unprocessable weight, as though each moment requires more energy to move through than it should, and then days that dissolve entirely, hours that cannot be accounted for, not because attention was scattered, but because the field was operating in a processing range outside the ordinary conscious bandwidth. Something was being sorted, calibrated, restructured, in a register the waking mind does not have direct access to. The body reflects this. The body is always the first physical instrument to register a frequency change, and it reports that change through sensations the medical model was not designed to interpret. Unusual fatigue that genuine rest does not resolve, a pressure in the chest or the skull that arrives without external cause, a heightened sensitivity to environments that previously felt neutral, certain spaces now feeling energetically hostile, certain people now registering as incompatible in ways that are felt before they are reasoned, a periodic sensation of watching your own life from a slight remove. Not dissociation in the clinical sense, but a field that has partially shifted its center of gravity and has not yet reoriented fully to the body it inhabits. These are not symptoms of illness. They are threshold markers. They are the body's unambiguous confirmation that the repositioning is not theoretical, not metaphorical, not a matter of perspective. It is occurring in real tissue, real current, real time. The fifth recognition is the one that concerns silence, the particular silence that descends on a field in the deepest phase of transit. In every field approaching a significant correction, there is a period that has the texture of inner death, a stillness that is not peace, a quiet that carries no restoration, a suspension of the usual interior noise that does not feel like clarity, but like exposure, like the field has been stripped of its habitual frequency layers and left standing in an unfamiliar openness with no map for what it is supposed to do there. This silence is not emptiness. The Arcturian field diagnostic identifies it as clearing, the specific energetic condition of a signal pattern that has fully disengaged from the old frequency, while the new pattern has not yet achieved its first stable impression. In this window, the field is in transit between stations. It is not broadcasting from the old position. It is not yet receiving clearly from the new one. And the transit feels like nothing, like absence where something used to be. Many people in this phase conclude that they have lost their connection to whatever was guiding them, that the thread has been cut, that they have been abandoned by whatever larger intelligence was previously in contact. What has actually happened is a channel reassignment. The old frequency band has gone quiet, not because the connection was severed, but because the field is being redirected to a new transmission range. The silence is not the end of guidance. It is the interval required for the new channel to come into resolution. The sixth marker, the one the Council specifically reserved for the final phase of this transmission, is what they designate the moment of forced incompatibility. This is the precise point in a correction cycle where the outer life, as it has been constructed, becomes structurally unsustainable, not emotionally difficult, not theoretically questionable, structurally unable to continue holding its form. Something that appeared permanent ends without sufficient cause. Something that functioned as a foundation reveals itself to be a temporary load-bearing wall that the new architecture cannot incorporate. A relationship ends or fundamentally transforms without a proportionate triggering event. The shift arrives not from a single rupture, but from an accumulated frequency divergence that finally exceeds what proximity can bridge. A career direction evacuates its meaning with a totality that feels entirely disproportionate to any identifiable event, as though the significance that once inhabited it was quietly withdrawn from the inside. A belief system that previously organized your entire perception of reality is exposed as insufficient, not by argument or evidence, but by the simple fact that it no longer generates the coherence it once did, and nothing has yet arrived to replace it. This is not punishment administered from outside. This is the field forcing alignment between the outer architecture and the inner frequency that has already undergone revision. The old structure could not contain the new signal without beginning to rupture at its seams. The rupture is not the injury. The rupture is the field's corrective mechanism, responding to an incompatibility that had already reached its structural limit. The collapse is not what went wrong. The collapse is what the correction looks like from the outside. You have been living inside one or more of these markers. You recognize them as they were named not because this transmission invented the experience, but because your field had already registered every phase of this process and had been waiting, perhaps for a long time, for someone to arrive with language precise enough to describe what it had already been moving through alone. That recognition landing in you right now is not passive reception. It is an activation. It is the moment the correction shifts from unconscious process to conscious participation. And that shift, from enduring to navigating, from surviving to orienting, is the precise threshold the Council needed you to cross before the 72-hour window opens. The ultimate revelation the Council needs you to receive tonight is this: you are not at the beginning of something falling apart. You are at the first visible surface of a process that has been underway in your field for considerably longer than you have been consciously aware of. What you interpreted as the onset of the instability was not the onset. It was the moment the invisible process accumulated sufficient density to break through into your daily perception. The actual repositioning began earlier, in the moments when something stopped feeling right without a reason you could name. In the choices you began quietly avoiding without logic to support the avoidance. In the relationships that began feeling like performances rather than presences, long before any visible deterioration could be pointed to. In the persistent background sense that you were living slightly displaced from your actual trajectory, that the life you were inhabiting was close to the right one, but not precisely it. All of that was the process, already in motion, already reorganizing the field, already collapsing what could not survive the frequency transition into the band you are being moved toward. The Arcturian High Council does not deliver corrections as warnings. They deliver them as preparations. You are not being corrected because something went wrong. You are being corrected because your current field frequency has genuinely outgrown the architectural container it was previously operating within, and the process of repositioning cannot reach completion while the old structure remains intact around it. What is falling is not your life. What is falling is the version of your life that was constructed at a frequency you have already surpassed. The new line is not yet visible to you, but the Council has already mapped it. And they delivered this transmission tonight because the 72-hour window approaching your field is the precise threshold at which the correction either becomes a conscious movement you can navigate with orientation or an unconscious collapse you can only survive. They chose to make it conscious because you are on the list that warranted that choice, because your signal was assessed, identified, and confirmed as one that required direct contact rather than continued drift. Repeat this once, aloud or in the full and undivided attention of your inner field. I do not fear the shift. I recognize it. That is not a comfort phrase. That is a field-level repositioning of the interpretive frame through which your nervous system is currently reading everything that is happening to you. Recognition is not the same as understanding. It does not require you to have answers or to see the destination clearly. It requires only that you stop reading the process as malfunction and begin reading it as movement. Recognition is the prior step to everything that follows. And it is precisely the step the Council needed you to reach tonight, before the window opens, before the threshold is crossed. While there is still time to move through what is coming with your eyes open, rather than your field braced against something it has already been authorized to receive. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognizes something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Quantum. You are recognizing a process already in motion, and this is only the beginning.